small forgotten town, there's an old phone booth that stands alone on a desolate road. It's said that at midnight, the phone rings, and if you're brave enough to answer, you'll hear the voice of a loved one who has long since passed. But beware, not all voices from beyond are friendly. Tonight, we delve into the chilling tale of the last call, where the line between the living and the dead blurs, and every call could be your last.
On the outskirts of town, along a stretch of empty road, there stands an old weathered phone booth. Its glass panes are cracked, the metal rusted, and the receiver hangs lifelessly by the cord. It's a relic of a time long gone, when people would stop to make a call on their way home. But this phone booth is different. It's said to be cursed. The locals know the legend well. Every few months on a moonless night, just as the clock strikes midnight, the phone rings. No one knows who or what is on the other end. Those who are brave enough to answer say they hear the voice of a loved one, someone who has passed away. The calls start off innocent enough, but they always end the same way, with a chilling message: this is your last call. Most people avoid the road after dark, unwilling to risk the call. But there are always those who can't resist, who need to hear the voice of someone they've lost, no matter the cost. And it was curiosity and grief that drew Mark to the phone booth on that fateful night. Mark had lost his wife Sarah in a car accident the previous year. She had been his everything, and without her, life felt like an endless blur of emptiness. He had heard the stories about the phone booth, but never believed them, until the night he drove past and saw it there, standing against the backdrop of the darkened sky, almost beckoning him. He pulled over, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for. Closure maybe, or just the chance to hear her voice one last time. As he approached, he felt a strange sensation, as if the air around him had grown thicker, charged with an unseen energy. The booth loomed before him, its door slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. He hesitated, his hand trembling as he reached for the receiver. His breath hitched as he picked it up, pressing it to his ear. At first there was nothing but static, a faint buzzing that made his skin crawl. He closed his eyes, willing himself to breathe, to focus. And then he heard it, a voice, faint and distant, like a whisper carried on the wind. It was her. It was Sarah. Mark, can you hear me?
Mark, can
Her
you
voice
hear
was
me?
soft, filled with a sadness that cut through him like a knife. He felt tears welling up in his eyes as he leaned against the glass, his legs weak. Sarah? Oh my God. Sarah, is it really you? He could barely get the words out, his voice cracking with emotion. But the voice on the other end only sighed, a sound that seemed to echo with 1,000 unsaid words. I've missed you so much, he whispered, his heart aching with every syllable. There was a long silence on the other end, and then her voice came through again, clearer this time, more urgent. Mark, you have to listen to me. You need to leave. Now.
Mark, you have to listen to me. You need to leave now.
He frowned, confused. Leave? Why would he leave when she was finally here, finally speaking to him? What do you mean? I'm not going anywhere. I can't. No, Mark, you don't understand. Her voice was sharp. It's not safe. You have to go. This is your last call. His blood ran cold at her words. Last call, the stories, the warning. But before he could ask her anything else, the line went dead. The silence on the other end, more deafening than anything he had ever heard. He pulled the receiver away, staring at it as if it would give him answers. He turned to leave, his heart racing, but something caught his eye. A figure standing on the other side of the road, just beyond the reach of the streetlight. It was dark, its features obscured, but he could feel its eyes on him, watching. Fear gripped him as he stepped back, the phone booth feeling like a cage. The figure moved, stepping closer, its shape shifting and twisting in the shadows. He could feel his pulse in his throat, could barely breathe as it raised a hand, pointing directly at him. "This is your last call," Sarah's voice echoed in his mind, and he knew he had to run, had to get away. He bolted from the booth, the door slamming shut behind him with a force that shook the glass. He ran to his car, fumbling with the keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get them in the lock. As he drove away, the phone booth grew smaller in his rearview mirror, the figure standing beside it, unmoving, watching him leave. He didn't stop until he was back in the safety of his home. The image of that dark shape burned into his mind. He never spoke of that night again, never drove past the phone booth, but the memory of Sarah's voice, of her desperate warning, haunted him. And sometimes, late at night, he would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what would have happened if he had stayed, wondering if the next person who answered the call would be so lucky. The phone booth still stands on that lonely stretch of road, waiting for its next visitor. And when the clock strikes 12, it rings, its call echoing through the empty night. Because some voices are meant to be heard, and some calls are never meant to be answered. If you ever find yourself on that road and you hear the phone ring, remember, it might be your last call. But remember, it's just a story. Or is it?